That's so tight. Well, yeah, I think any indie can take a lot of these lessons and like go and start a solid base for what their brand's going to be, you know? And I think, thank you so much for providing all this insight, dude.
Yeah, no sweat, man. I hope it was helpful. It's really easy to kind of get lost in the fluffy stuff when you're talking about this. So I'm trying to kind of balance, touching on that, but also some more practical things that people can apply. Yeah. So I hope, I hope I kind of arrived somewhere in that ballpark through all this.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I am your host, Circa. My co-host, Corinne, is not with us right now because this is a live podcast. And in the studio, I have a young man by the name of Casey Schumacher, a.k.a. the designer of the Indepreneur logo and branding package.
Guilty as charged.
And the full stack creative branding package here on YouTube, which if you're watching this on YouTube, the little bubble up, is it up here? That's him. Shout outs, Casey. How you doing?
Welcome. Doing great, man. Did I hear you correctly? Did you say this is a live podcast?
It's not live.
Oh.
It's not live, so no one can hear you make mistakes.
Cool.
I can edit out everything.
There will be plenty. So
also, I have the opportunity to edit all of your answers to make you seem like an idiot.
Great. Fantastic.
So welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah, man.
Great to be
here. I know you're a longtime fan, first-time guest.
Yeah.
Long-time listener.
Hell yeah. Since like 300 subs, man.
I guess we're here today, Casey, to get your advice for independent musicians when it comes to branding, graphic design, all those things.
Okay.
But also to kind of hear your journey a little bit, because you started out in music and you're a creative person, and it's always cool to get the perspective of someone who's managed to manifest their creativity in a professional setting. And also someone who's, got the background and is in the culture. So kind of how did that start?
I didn't know what graphic design was.
Right.
In retrospect, it all kind of makes sense. Like I used to, when I was a kid, I would like make up my own skateboarding brand and draw a logo for it. Or like, I never forget in middle school, me and my friends had a band that just like didn't exist, right? Like we're like, oh, you play instruments, right? And like we'll
make a fake band,
right. Well, it felt very real, and I think we would have loved to have actually made some music. It wasn't real, Casey, but it was absolutely it was vaporware, and so I made a logo. An eventual
band.
Yep. I made a logo for that in Microsoft Paint, and
you use that to take on investment from all your parents, and
and then we rose to stardom, and I didn't know what graphic design was really.
Did you always like draw or no?
Yeah. Was never a great illustrator,
right?
But probably above average, I would say. So then fast forward to like college, I went to a traditional university for a year, flunked out.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I went to Florida Gulf Coast University for 2 semesters.
Okay.
Did awful.
What was your major there?
I was going to be an English teacher. Was kind of the plan.
That was your plan?
Yeah. I liked writing and reading, and was like, oh yeah, I'll just get like a teaching degree and be a teacher.
Noble path.
So that was the plan. That didn't pan out.
It's a noble path that you failed at.
Thanks, miserably,
man.
But yeah, it was abysmal. So I moved back down to South Florida with like no fucking plan. You know, just like super discouraged. Was like broke, fucking addicted to drugs. Working 3 jobs. Just like I didn't have a car, so I was like,
but you had cool T-shirts and sneakers, though.
Yeah, I looked good, baby.
Yeah,
I was an absolute train wreck inside, but I looked fly.
Yeah, that's what matters most.
Priorities, dude. Yeah. Priorities. So I'm trying to be as brief as possible, but
it's okay.
I'm verbose.
This is an hour-long podcast. Everybody gets settled in. Grab a cup of cocoa or a nice 2 fingers of scotch.
Ooh.
You know?
If it wasn't, 10 in the morning, I'd be down. So my dad was talking to an old friend's dad, and that old friend, my buddy Jordan Donnelly. Shout out Jordan Donnelly.
Shout out.
He's an awesome photographer. But at the time, he was at Full Sail for graphic design before he like got into photography. And I don't think he ever ended up finishing the graphic design degree. But his dad was raving to my dad about the school. He's like, "Yeah, Jordan's going to this like cool school, and it's artsy and
it
all
is
this
super
stuff."
cool. Yeah.
Well, and then you get on the phone with an admissions rep, and
and then it's fucking the coolest thing in the world.
oh my goodness, because they know
They know exactly how to get you there at Full Sail. Yeah, we both went to Full Sail University. A little bit of backstory to kind of couch this in is we both went to Full Sail. Full Sail is like a media college. So if you are into music or film or graphic design or 3D or games
or the business of any of those
or
things,
the business, you can go there. Mm-hmm. And some degree programs there are more valid than others, I'll say. Like their recording arts program has taken a hit because you don't need grades to get in there. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like just sign up and go. Do you have the money kind of thing? And so a lot of people who are like, I'm a musician, but I need to go to college. What do I do? Just automatically pick recording arts, even if they have only like a tangential interest in actually recording the music. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that program ends up like they had to lower their standards so that people wouldn't fail out because they weren't actually interested in wrapping cables, right?
Yep.
And so that program's taking a hit, but the graphic design program seemed pretty solid. Like
we could probably do a whole podcast about pros and cons of Full Sail, but I think one thing that they realized was that, because if you remember, they had that policy where if you failed a class the first time, you could take it again the following semester, which there is, as you know, is a month because it's accelerated. You could take it again for free.
Because it's bullshit. I mean, accelerated.
So I mean, what happens then, right? Like kids fail, and then they can't sell those seats to the next, right? This guy is sitting in the seat for free because he failed on the first try,
right?
And so
half your class is those dudes.
Very well may be, and then so I think that kind of wasn't great.
I was one of those dudes,
for the business model. And so they, at least in the DAD program, they passed a lot of people.
They made it easier.
Yeah.
It wasn't very challenging for graphic design.
Yeah, and it was kind of it was kind of hard to watch a little bit. Like my portfolio was garbage, but there was some kids that like we all present our final portfolio, and it's just like
I watch kids present like album release plans and stuff and like business plans that were just like, dude, you're gonna have a tough time in business. But like, so did I. Like, I don't think the education, I took entertainment business, and the education didn't really prepare me for anything in the entertainment field. My artist management teacher was Howie from the Backstreet Boys manager, not the Backstreet Boys manager, Howie's manager.
Cool.
And like, she was super cool and nice, but also like, is that the most like weathered management job in the industry? Probably not. You know, it's probably like in the spectrum, like one of the easier, less full contact management positions you can get. Mm-hmm. You didn't manage an artist up from like relative obscurity or anything like that. Yeah. Or maybe she did. Maybe I'd missed that part, but like it didn't seem that way. Mm-hmm. And so it was just like, am I getting the full scope of like what it's gonna take?
Right.
You know, and I kind of had to find my own way after that. But I did meet a lot of super people, and I think that's kind of how we ended up. You know, like Full Sail has all these awesome programs, but they don't integrate them. So it's not like you're doing like a business plan for a film kid who's doing a music video on that's not how it works.
Yep.
And we were like, fuck, there's like all these different creative people here. Why don't we just like start a quote unquote fraternity, like co-ed fraternity?
Yeah.
And we can do projects together. And I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I feel like I made a good show of like, I know what I'm doing.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And just
it was a blast though.
Is it? Yeah.
Shout out to Sig. That's what this tattoo is. If anyone's ever wondered what my one tattoo is, it's that. So Casey was like our design guy new SIG.
Yeah.
And that was a blast.
I didn't think about that until you mentioned it, but the fact that there isn't a ton of overlap, and I had plenty because I was also pursuing music at the time, so I had probably just as many friends in the recording arts program or whatever that degree was called as I did peers in the DAD program.
Week at Full Sail, I was like, "Where's the shows at? Where can I go see people perform?" And I got invited to a barn party at UCF, and Palmer Reed was there. And we talked about that on Palmer Reed's podcast. I'll put a link up here if you're on YouTube. And Palmer Reed was like, "Oh yeah, Case was at that." But that was where I met you, and I saw him perform. And you were a rapper at the time.
Yep.
And he killed it. Like the whole crowd was going crazy, and you weren't even that like experienced at that point.
No
right?
way. No.
Yeah. Mm-mm. And you like he knew how to turn up an entire crowd of strangers. And when he got off stage, I was like, dude, I have to know you. Let's hang out. Yeah.
Man, and I can't I can't thank you enough for doing that, because it's so cool that we're still friends and collaborators, and that all spurred from you just. I think a lot of people would have passed up that opportunity just because they thought they were too cool or something, right? Like
I thought you were too cool. I was like, how am I going to get this kid who just like tore down a crowd at college to fucking be my friend? You know?
Well, thank you, but. No, for real, man. Like
that's so weird. I think that does happen is like people assume. I think it's more people thought the way that I did than you might expect, but they don't come up because it's intimidating. If you just tore down a crowd, dude, if you just killed a room, like it's hard to go up to you and be like, dude, we're of the same ilk. Let's be friends. It's like, oh, were you just up on stage murdering it? Oh, you weren't? Okay, well then we're not like the same. So like, don't come up to me. What? That's what I figured it would be.
No way.
Yeah, you were very un-Hollywood. So we befriended each other, and then I started a joke that he is Hollywood. We called him Case Hollywood Window.
Yep, that was me.
Yeah. So you were at Full Sail, but you were pursuing a rap career at the time.
Yeah.
And you were nice.
Thanks, man.
I'm totally gonna roll like your music or your freestyles.
Okay,
so prepare for
Let me have some input on what you which cuts you go.
100% no.
I'm gonna have to phrase these words in layman's terms. These other rappers in my city is the lamest nerds that I ever laid eyes on. Turn them into bygones, acting like bitches. Here's some panties you could try on.
Oh, listen, it's Cert. I'm freaking berserk, and I robbed the engineer, but I'm spitting the verse. Some cats hurt because I'm rich and I'm piffing the perk. Plus I handle toys like Peter Griffin at work. If they hitting me, then I'm picking them first.
Awesome, man. Yeah, if you can find just like some of my really early YouTube freestyles.
He was good at rap,
is
what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
But anyways, tell me more about what the design program was like and how you ended up transitioning into the job market.
Well, I think, which I think we were kind of starting to touch on this, but it's kind of a cliche, but you learn more in the first year after school, I think, in probably any vocation than you do in your entire academic career. So, I was fortunate enough. A friend of mine, his like family owns a college and a chain. It's like a
yeah,
it's called City College, and it's like a.
Is that TC?
Yeah,
shout out TC, dude. Big shout outs. How's he doing?
He's doing great. I actually linked up with him last time I was in Fort Lauderdale.
It's amazing.
He's doing great.
TC basically was like, I want to push your career after college.
Yeah. I was signed to. He had a independent record label, still does. And I was signed to them.
He also had a garage, didn't he? Like a car.
Yeah. He was doing automotive customization for a bit. He's had his hands in a lot of stuff.
He's an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So his mom owns a college called City College. There's a handful of them up and down Florida, and it's just like it's like night school type stuff for people that are probably working a full-time job and may also have kids, and they just like want to get the degree. They didn't go to school, and so I was in-house there for a few years, and that's the first time I really got to touch was mostly print. I was doing all sorts of print collateral.
Right.
You know, some stuff was fun, like cool posters and things like that. And then other stuff was like really more in the weeds. Like, I redid their whole like academic, catalog sort of thing. Like all the course, it's just like a giant document.
PDF or something?
Well, up until that point, it was just like a Word document. And
Right.
yeah,
Like,
it's like
hey,
all
guys,
the courses listed.
you know.
It was one of the first things they wanted me to do was like redo that whole thing.
Yeah.
So I had barely touched Adobe InDesign at all up until that point, and I was like, oh shit, I need to learn like what paragraph styles are and how to make this thing so that it can be easily updated as courses are added and removed and stuff like that.
I think a big distortion that college puts in your head is that it's going to take you 6 months of daily, rigidly structured schooling to learn this one program. And it's like, I think like the 5 years after college was me learning slowly that that's not true. That I could probably pick it up in like a week. A week I get 50%. A month I get like 70%. 2 months I get 80%. And then like the rest of my life takes the rest of the 20.
Yeah, and it gets exponentially easier because you're like, for example, when I switched from Photoshop to Sketch for UI.
Yeah.
I just immersed myself in Sketch for like 2 weeks and it was rote, you know?
Yeah.
So, because there's like a point of reference, you're like, oh, well, I know how to do it with this tool.
Right.
And so you're just kind of like, yeah, you're learning the new keystrokes. And
I think a big thing that I've been learning is that like with videography, like it took me a little bit of time to figure out what I needed to ask. And I've realized that like one of the big barriers to learning any new creative skill is you're not doing it yet. So you don't know what you suck at or what you are going to fuck up. Yeah. And until you know what you're fucking up or can't do or suck at, you're never going to ask the right questions or make the right internet searches. So like go make something terrible.
Yep.
You know, and then go back and be like, that sucked. What sucked about it? Let's go Google it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think like that's when you start getting the terminology to ask the right questions of people and really rein it in. You know?
Yeah. I mean, if you search for, some feature by name, then like the Adobe forum is going to come up and someone with asking your exact question is going to be right there.
But if you Google like how to use Sketch, like you're fucked.
You're gonna, it's gonna be some surface level beginner tutorial for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing is like I think with whether it's traditional graphic design or music production or painting, anyone with a creative vision, it's up here, right? Like that's what we're trying to do.
Pick a thing you want to create and go try it out and do it terribly.
Yeah, and the like. You need to learn the tools in order to be able to bring the thing to life, you know? So that's one of the most frustrating parts about learning any new skill set in order to achieve that creative outcome is that you're picturing this thing up here and you're like, fuck, I just can't
I can't make
how
it.
do I do this? Right. You know, I don't know anything for all intents and purposes about music production, right? So I can think of the sickest beat, but I'm going to be banging my head against the wall if I open up Ableton and try to like make the beat that's in my head. You know what I mean? So a lot of like, that was a lot of what was happening at Full Sail. Like, you know, when we were doing like, there was a motion graphics course and it's like, fuck man, I want this thing to go behind this wall and like, but I don't know how to like mask it out yet. Right. So anyway.
Yeah.
Rambling, but
it's important because like you're right. It is the years right after college that matter. It's not the college like almost ever, unless you're like in an engineering or a medical degree, right?
Yeah.
And in that job, you kind of got the skills to work for somebody, deliver what they were asking for, pick up new technologies and just rip through them. And then how did you transition into like working with agencies? That was primarily what happened after?
Yeah. I kind of plateaued at City College, and I got my first taste of like, it seems crazy to call it web because I was just doing like a few banner ads. Like it was the first time everything up until that point I was really just doing print. And I did like a few banner ads for some stuff at City College, and I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. And then there was this agency that just kind of came across. I think it was like on Instagram or anyway. There's like in Fort Lauderdale, there's this area called Fat Village, and it kind of feels like Wynwood-esque. You know, it's like these warehouses that have been converted into art galleries and studios and offices and things like that. And everything's covered in graffiti and everything. And they have these art walks. And so, yeah, there's like an agency there called Helium Creative. Shout out Ryan and Chris at Helium Creative. And I was just like drooling over their work, you know, like I was looking at their Instagram, their website, and I was like, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen. Like it was like super sexy branding projects, and just like everything they were doing looked awesome. And I was like, man, I want to work there, you know? Right. And so I didn't have much of any portfolio then. Like I just didn't, it just wasn't great at all. And I kind of knew that. And so I even just said that in the interview. Like I went in there and interviewed, and I was like, look, I'm sure you've seen better portfolios in the interviewing process, but like no one wants this as bad as I do right now. And I'll like work my ass off if you hire me. And, they called me back that day and made me an offer. I think
also like as an agency owner, like I want to know that you can handle a client, like ultimately.
Sure.
Right? Cause that's the biggest, taking off my plate, right? Is if you can handle a client from beginning to end. And like when you've worked for someone as like one of their only graphic designers, like that's kind of, you build up those skills, I think.
Yeah. So that was my first, they were and still are like a proper branding shop. I mean, that's what they get hired for. And that was my first real taste of web. Like the first website I ever designed was at Helium. And, so, that was the first agency I worked at.
And then how many agencies have you worked at?
4, including where I'm at now.
Right. Yeah. And now you're a senior graphic designer. So you kind of worked your way up the title ranks.
Yeah. I mean, technically my title is director of product design. We're a small shop, so I am the design department.
Right.
But yeah, so product design is kind of what, basically everything's kind of converged, and they're like, if you're a product designer, it's kind of like a holistic approach to, it's typically, product designers are typically designing digital products, apps.
Right. So app screens, what the buttons look like, what everything looks like, but also sometimes the branding of the entire product.
Well, so how things look like that, at big companies, they silo a lot of this stuff. So like at Facebook, for example, they'll have just a UI designer, which is what that's the code of paint, right? That's how this stuff looks. UX is like what needs to go where. Like, do we even need the screen at all? Is a new view for this the best approach, or maybe it should be a modal, or maybe it's a little message that pops from the top and then disappears after a few seconds. Like making those decisions and kind of like plotting out the user's journey. Not only in the product, but sometimes leading up to it, and then after the fact. Like if it's a product that has maybe like a brick and mortar component, then the journey doesn't start
on
with
the
app, right?
Yeah.
So all that stuff is like user experience.
So it's like collateral for like if I'm going to the supermarket and there's a kiosk for their new app, and like this is my experience getting into the app, kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's a fair example.
That's interesting.
When people say product design, it's kind of all these things sort of lumped into one. Again, holistic
I'm
approach.
a marketer. I make websites, ads, email copy, I manage your email routing.
Yeah.
I manage your, like, pretty much everything at the agency. Like, we're like, so yeah, I understand. It's like, tends to be a blanket term, especially with the convergence going on today.
Yep.
Where like, you can't be you can't be a half stack anything.
Right. Well, and I mean, it's very in line with what you're doing here on the YouTube channel. I mean, like a product designer is full stack in a lot of ways,
field,
because you need to you need to know enough about engineering to communicate what needs to be done to a developer.
Yeah.
And to know what the limitations are.
Yeah.
When you maybe you can't do this thing with like the tech stack that you're building the thing on, right? Like, you need to know a little bit about like what makes good animation, because these days there's all these
a lot of bit about customer psychology, which you share a lot in terms of when you're designing. You share a lot with marketers because you have to think about the experience.
Yeah, and we'll lean on them for that stuff. Like that's kind of more, like that's more your wheelhouse. So, in the same way that like I'm not gonna tell a developer how to code, right? But I do need to speak the language a little bit.
Look like,
and know like where the endpoints are and things like that. So, and then like you touched on copywriting. I mean, you know these days it's kind of taboo to just like throw lorem ipsum in something and show it to a client. It's like at the very least put headline goes here, brief description goes here, and that like but at Trim, the shop I'm at now, product designers take a first pass at copy pretty much always. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And going back to the whole like siloing thing, there's this kind of emerging career, I guess you could say, called a UX writer. Like again, bigger companies that can afford to do so, they'll silo that and they'll have someone dedicated to writing calls to action and instructions for forms. And that's what they're calling a UX writer these days. So, yeah.
So why'd you quit rap, man?
Shit.
We were talking about this the other day, so it's kind of a leading question. We've already kind of had this discussion a little bit, and I think
I still probably don't have a good answer, but well, so I mean, at Full Sail, I was kind of like half-assing two things. I was trying to pass and get my degree, and then literally we did that Jet Life tour. Like I had to like
you toured with Currency.
Yeah. For one
shout out
for one leg, for one leg of the tour, it was three.
Went on a tour. You were on a tour with Currency though.
Yeah.
Sure, 3 shows, whatever.
As an opener,
it's fucking Currency the rapper, dude.
Yeah,
Spitta.
It was super cool. It was super cool.
So like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Design started cutting checks before music did, right?
Yeah.
Like I started like making money, and then it's
that's a good answer.
So there was that, and I don't know. I think I do this thing, whether it's music or when I get excited about something as a fan, I'm like, I want to do that, I'll listen to, this morning I was listening to like this heavy ass hardcore band, like,
man, I need to be in a hardcore band.
Yeah. And I was like, fuck, dude, that'd be so sick.
I do the same thing with comedy podcasts, with marketing podcasts. This is why we have this podcast. But this podcast has also grown to be like a major asset to Indepreneur.
Sure.
So it's not always that it's like ridiculous for you to do that, is what I mean. And I think that's natural, totally. Like that's why we have this YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Like, I saw YouTubers and I was like, that's cool. I want to do that. To use a camera.
Yeah.
So I can't be mad at that, but I don't think that's a good reason why you stopped. And I think yesterday we were talking about, and Dukes and I talked about this a lot. Dukes was on our last podcast. I'll put a link up here. Dukes was like, when I was, for a long time, making music was a form of social validation for me.
Yep.
That I couldn't seek through other means because I didn't have much self-confidence or self-actualization. Totally. He didn't use those exact words, but it's pretty much the summary of the conversation. Yep. And I think that a lot of musicians go through this point where it's like, if music isn't what I need to be okay and feel like I fit in, then what is it now? And what music do I make now that I don't need to make music to make myself popular or like well-liked? Yeah.
That resonates, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like some people never come up with an answer to that. They're like, I don't actually think I need this thing. Like I did and it was cool, but it's not something I see myself like just killing myself to get,
Yeah.
Is that what it was? I don't mean to Dr. Phil you right now or anything.
No,
like that.
you're not.
Totally Oprah.
Like I said, it's kind of multifaceted. we've talked about this also, but I always struggled to kind of like brand myself as a rapper. You know, I think I imagine for. Yeah, right. It's so much easier to do it for other people. I'm just like, here's what you need to do. Got it. But yeah, when it comes to branding myself, I really struggle with it because, you know, like in high school, I was like class clown, goofball kind of thing. And so one thing that
you are still that
100%.
We're both that
100%. Yeah. But one thing that I've found challenging, and I'm getting better at it in adulthood, but like, taking my work seriously, but not taking myself seriously. And so I think so much of like the music I was making, especially early on, was this like, you know, I was trying so hard to be this dude that I wasn't, right? Okay. Like I was like, man,
I think that goes hand in hand with the kind of thing we were talking about, where it's like when you need music to be this thing for validation, you tend to not make music that has any grounding in like what your experience is.
100%.
And the challenge, I think, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I know there's got to be people out there listening to this who are like, fuck, dude, that is me right now. What do I want to make music about now that I don't need to make it about how I'm the shit?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's a big question. And for me, it's the songs I've made since I had that kind of realization have been more, and I still make some songs that need to be about how I'm the shit. Like, so I'll go to write a rap song and it's like a duck to water, you know? It's like old habits die hard.
Yeah.
And it's fun. Like, it's just having fun. But a lot of the more meaningful songs that I've written since that moment have been more about my experience with existential angst and my childhood and maybe making some admissions that I'm not brave enough to make in a conversation with someone. So I'll just do it in a song, you know? That kind of thing. And it's been much more of a catharsis. And there is a way through it, but it's also the medium. It's like, do I do it with rap still? Do I, you know, like, how do I do it? So yeah, I just wanted to kind of like touch on it so that people knew out there, like, if you're going through this, like, I think every musician is going to go through this if you haven't already.
Yep.
It's like, how do you, and major musicians do it in the middle of their very successful career.
Sure.
You know? And so the answer doesn't have to be like, I make different music. The answer could be, oh, well, I have fulfillment through my family or my job or what I'm doing now. And I don't really need music.
That's the case for me for the most part. The one thing I do miss about music is like the on-stage performance. I don't
killed it on stage.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm not good on stage. Or rather, I've had moments where I'm good on stage, especially when I'm with a band. But if it's just me, I don't want to talk to you. I want to go try to sound like my soul heroes. I don't want to be like, "What's up, Orlando? How we doing, Maxine's on Shine? Welcome to Sunday morning."
Well, if you just say it like that, I think you'll do great.
Good response,
yeah. So it'd be dope if I could like get on stage and present my designs that way. That'd be sick, right? Like, yo, make some noise for this logo lockup. Anyway, yeah.
Do you ever feel like, have you written since you stopped making music?
I mean, little like throwaways here and there, but
it's still there, guys.
But I haven't I haven't jotted anything down in a minute. It's funny because we saw Red yesterday, but literally the last thing I ever wrote or recorded was for a project of his, and I actually don't know if it even made it on there.
Shout out to DJ Red.
Shout out DJ Red.
I'll put his link in the description if you want to hear some dopeness.
Yeah.
I think I'll just end it with this, is that think about what we've said here and maybe take an approach to writing something that's more like, what's something I have trouble saying?
Yeah.
Or I don't have an outlet to say.
Yeah.
And just take it from that place. And some of the best stuff I've ever written comes from there.
That's great advice, man.
Yeah. And if you ever need help recording and putting it out, I'm here.
I wouldn't rule it out. I think I'm going to scratch that itch again at some point in this life. So. It probably won't be.
You got the tattoos already. It's like, let's fucking complete the set, dude.
I'm not connecting the dots there, but I'll run with it.
You're hipper than me.
Oh, that's all it takes, dude? Is just...
Yeah, dude, you got the
60
look.
hours of tattooing
That's another
in your
thing
hip.
that like I used to dismiss, but it's very real. Is like the look. Like
The look.
every celebrity has a look for a reason. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's not on accident.
it's not on accident.
Yeah.
And like it's a consideration. You know, if you
No,
don't have a
the
personal
image is-
style, yeah,
Image is huge, and I think we can actually kind of bring it full circle in that way, because that's
part of your brand.
It's a huge, yeah, man. I mean, we were talking about Billie Eilish. Is that how you
Billie
say
Eilish,
her name?
yeah.
I mean, come on, dude. Like, I mean, she wildly talented, awesome.
Yeah.
Love the album, big fan. But if she looked like the girl next door, right?
Right.
Significantly less interesting, right? Like
Right.
if she didn't have her
she
aesthetic,
came out like Mandy Moore, it would be a problem.
yeah. So I feel you on that. Image is important.
Did you see the campaign on Spotify that they did with her?
I don't think so.
They made a bunch of vertical videos, and then when you go to play her song on Spotify, those play behind the player.
Yeah, and when you share them to Instagram, they get shared as well,
Wow.
which is neat. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And then when
Other artists have done that.
when you go to her profile, there's an alpha'd out, like she's on a green screen and they alpha the background and it's just your Spotify gray background. So she's like on top of it. And yeah, clearly like she's got a visual brand like crazy.
Yep.
It's kind of like this definitely macabre with the tarantulas and the blue hair and whatnot. But then it's also like hip hop. It's also like
For sure.
fly ass clothes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's touching on a lot of stuff, like the sick ass like bootleg designer
like, you
shit.
could
that
be a
she
hip-hop fan
wears,
and like her.
Some of her stuff, I think my mom might enjoy. You
Right.
know? It's like
Totally. She's
her voice is good.
Crossing over everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Billie Eilish. She's killing it. She's on top of the industry right now with that latest release.
Next episode, Billie Eilish interview coming
Well,
soon.
she'll be here.
Yeah, Full Stack Creative.
Yeah. So, okay. So yeah. Our audience is primarily musicians, but also some filmmakers, also some graphic designers like yourself, also some people like that. But everyone's got a personal brand these days. you know?
Yeah.
But it's extremely important for musicians because I feel it's your only hope of monetizing long term is to build an enviable brand. And we made a video about this where we talked a little bit about like how, like bands that you might hate have done very well with this, like
Sure.
Kiss or ICP or The Misfits or Hatebreed or whatever, you know, like
Slayer.
yeah, like they've taken this underground microcosm and made it make more money than a lot of major mainstream artists because they have a line of products that corresponds to a central brand. And so my thing is like brand yourself early, and try to backtrack as little as possible.
Yeah.
And so you're an expert in that. And I wanted to kind of get your 2 cents on like what you'd recommend to musicians or any words of wisdom you could give. And we'll kind of spin off from there.
The easy stuff is the visual identity.
Yeah.
That's and we talked about it a lot in the video, but that's kind of like those things are more tangible. Like
Yeah.
when if you hire a branding agency tomorrow, they're going to tell you a lot of and it's true, but it's a lot of fluffy stuff about how branding is storytelling and the deck you get from that agency is going to have things about like the tone you should be using for your Instagram captions and words you shouldn't say, words you should say, whose merch is awesome is Travis Scott. Like he does, it's so smart, but he like it might be per state. Anyway, I saw him in Jacksonville, and he had these tour T-shirts, and there was like one chunk of it where it had the Florida flag.
Wow.
And so
Florida has a flag?
Yeah. It's like a red X, like you've never seen Florida, Florida flag.
It's like white with an X?
Yeah. There's some seal in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So he did this this like Florida exclusive shirt.
That's fly.
And I imagine that was being done for every state. So that's sick.
Earlier, Jex Carter was in the office earlier this week, and he was asking me he was like, I want to do cassettes
Dope.
to distribute my singles. Problem is no one has a cassette player. I was like, let's bulk order cassette players. There's got to be somewhere you can get them for like $10.
Sure, yeah.
And he was like,
Alibaba
but it's
or
too
something.
much, right? And I was like, not if you subsidize the cost, not if so we added it up and it was like $18 to print a cassette, and give them a player. It's like charge $25. You're making a little bit of money, but you can't buy that kind of branding. Like
that's the player and the cassette.
Yeah, like you can get the cassette printed for like $5. You can get the players and like 30 of them. They'll be like $12 or $11 a piece.
That shit is sick, bro.
Yeah. And
That's
then
awesome.
You're like, oh, you can only
stealing that idea.
Get this single on cassette, right? And it's like, yeah, go the extra mile to make an experience for people with your merch. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Travis Scott's done there is like, make it something, dude. Make it like, oh, this is actually a misprinted color. There's only this many of them. This was actually like intentionally this way, or like make a story behind the product that someone's gonna buy.
Yeah,
and that all comes back from that like central brand, like because like I think if I buy a Johnny Cupcake shirt that's really clever. All that brand equity, it doesn't go to the joke. It goes to the skull and crossbones cupcake.
Yeah.
It all accumulates on the mark, So that when I see that cupcake, I'm like, every experience I've had with their products is right there in that logo.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's that when people talk about brand identity, that's what it is. It's the culmination of all the extensions of the brand, how you feel when you see any one piece of it, and all of those things that you're talking about come into play. So. Yeah. It can be slogans or photography or the mark itself, the experience you've had in a store, if that's
and the more rich and textured each of those things are, the more equity you accumulate on the central asset.
Definitely.
Yeah. So okay, what are these central assets? The visually that you start out with.
So again, if we're just talking about visual identity, the kind of entry level visual identity pieces that virtually everyone needs is a logo and
a mark.
Yeah, so some sort of little icon.
Yeah,
maybe, and maybe it's a letter.
And you were saying in the video that like this, that you want to think about it as like, can it be a favicon?
Yeah.
Can it be 16 pixels by 16 pixels?
Yeah, it should be something that's going to translate well or small. And when you get into brands that have like a more robust visual identity system, there might be minified versions of marks,
right?
Like I don't
know. Where
they
remove some detail to make it work at a small level.
Exactly. So I don't know, but I would wager that if we went to like Coca-Cola right
I was
now,
just thinking the exact same
thing. It's probably a red square with like a cursive C.
Cursive C, dude.
Yeah. So
probably,
but they have. There's actually a fun little website to check out that'll kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, and I think it's just responsivebrands.com or something like that. If you just
shows
Google
how they design brands to be responsive for all formats.
Well, it's a responsive website, and it just has big company logos. So it has Coca-Cola, Chanel, and as you like grab the corner of the window and scale it down, it shows you the more minified version of the mark, Right. So like with Chanel, the logo type gets dropped at a certain breakpoint, then the circle around it gets dropped at a certain breakpoint, and
the logo itself is responsive.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fly.
So, and that'll just kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. Like, and Coca-Cola's on there too. So you'll see the full-blown cursive one, and then one that has like less detail. And I mean, when you're a brand like Coca-Cola, you have this like heritage mark, right? Like this old, like the original logo. I mean, they've been around for like fucking 100 years or some shit. So they have like, you got to keep that one in the vault and use it from time to time. But you also need to kind of like, maybe tweak things a little bit so that they're more functional.
A broad majority of the people watching this right now, if you say like, the Coca-Cola logo has changed dramatically over the years, they'll be like, what? Has it?
Yeah. And that's the point, know, because again, as soon as it starts to deviate too much, I'm not feeling those things anymore when I see it.
Yeah.
And brand equity goes out the window.
Yeah.
So that's why it's fun. I love seeing art where they'll kind of like flip stuff, right? Like they'll do, they'll put like Marlboro branding on a bottle of water, and it's,
it
it's
just
shit
feels
like that.
odd.
But it's like,
It could work.
That looks like cowboy killers. Like that. I don't have good connotations surrounding that font, those colors.
I don't want my water to have that branding.
Right. Yeah. So stuff like that is kind of a cool illustration of what I'm talking about, right?
Or like a Huggies milkshake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you want mark, and there's logo type, and sometimes those are the same thing.
They can be.
In the case with Coca-Cola, that's kind of the.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of like a tiny little icon that Coke has. I think it's mostly the logo type, and then they kind of have that.
They use, what they use a
ambiguous-
lot is the bottle cap.
Yep.
They use that a lot.
Or the silhouette of the bottle, right? Like
that's
another
use that, right?
That's
the classic
iconic.
Coca-Cola bottle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's like that brings in so much more to talk about.
And then we got seasonal shit like Santa and the fucking polar bears.
Yeah. The polar bear is definitely an icon. But so like sometimes you want to represent the name of your company or you as an artist or your band in a stylized font, and that's a logo type, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so sometimes logo type, there's not much of a difference. Like it's all incorporated into one.
Yeah, but again, you will need to
have some kind of more square thing.
Yeah, there's you can pull a letter from the logo type and use that as the symbol, but you're probably going to need some sort of teensy tiny little icon for things like favicons, business cards, stuff like that. So most brands have something like that.
Yeah, and I think for musicians, we were talking about this in the video, but musicians don't do it enough. They don't have that square mark.
Yeah, but I think what I see most often is just logo types. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's usually a seasonal logo type. It's like there for 6 months, and maybe it's on their website. They're not making a big deal about it. No one really knows that that's the logo type.
Right.
And then it swaps out. Like
yeah. And then a family, like distant family member who knows how to use the Adobe Creative Suite, like makes them a new one, and they're like, "Oh, that's cool. Thanks for making that." And they throw that up on
except like
the Bandcamp or
with
SoundCloud.
some of the brands we were talking about, that is not true. Like Eminem, always been the block font with the backwards
Z. Yeah.
Slayer, Slayer is always in that red, like. Looks like it was violently drawn on a desk or something like that.
Yeah, with the pentagram.
Yeah. ICP has always been this very gaudy...
Hatchet Man, baby.
The Hatchet Man is their mark, but they have like this gaudy, like old parchment script kind of like representation of the full name.
Okay.
The Misfits have their stylized type.
Yep.
And the skull.
Yeah.
The fucking Misfits skull, dude.
Yep.
And it's just odd to see these brands that... coming out of these places where people think they're more dirty or less than or kind of like fringe culture. It's like, no, those guys are smart. They're smart branding.
Yep.
It's just crazy. And then like I just did the Halsey website review, and like there's nothing going on there branding wise at all, except for Capital's like 1950s logo at the bottom. And it's like, dude, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And so like I think, not that Halsey's hurting for money or that she doesn't have a successful business, but it's like, if you want to build a strong business that you own fully as a musician, you need to start monetizing the relationship you have with your audience, not your music. Like your music helps build that relationship. You need to build a brand that represents that relationship and then create products that embody that relationship, in something that's consumable or wearable.
Yep.
And I just think, like not enough artists are doing that. You said you had trouble branding yourself as an artist. You meant more on the ethereal side and not so much on the like logo and logo.
Well, even what we're talking about, I was guilty of. I changed my rap name a handful of times. When I finally landed on Case Windu, I whipped up a little like Star Wars logo rip.
Fly, by the way.
Thank you.
He had a Goodwood piece, right? That was Case Windu with the lightsabers.
Yeah,
and I was so jealous. I was in Full Sail like. What's Goodwood? I need a Goodwood.
Man.
Yeah.
Too funny.
Yeah. So, and then colors and fonts.
Yeah. Those are other parts of the...
Yeah.
For the sake of this conversation, I don't know how helpful it's going to be, but all of Drake's recent stuff is absolutely fire. Yeah. And
obviously he's got a big team.
Well, what's super dope is, I don't know... don't know if a ton of people know this, but so there's a Miami brand called Stray Rats.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. And I
almost bought one of their T-shirts online once I found out about them, but they're dope.
They're fire. And I've actually met the owner and like visionary behind it, this dude Julian, in passing a couple times. And anyway, he did the Aubrey and the Three Migos.
That's amazing.
Merch and posters and all that stuff. Like the way Drake is kind of like branding these tours is so sick. And all the new shit that Julian did for Assassination Vacation is super sick. So I drool over his work. I love Stray Rats. It's so, he was like a South Florida hardcore kid. Yeah. I'd see at shows and shit. And Stray Rats has been, what he's built from just like years and years of dedication and like, I just really admire. And the fact that he's doing this stuff now for OVO is super sick. So that's some stuff that I'm like drooling over recently. The aesthetics he comes up with for these tours are just awesome.
Yeah. I think, it's not hard at least when I was a kid, like, being like a little entrepreneur kid involved in music, you love the process of figuring out what like the name of this thing's gonna be, and here's what the look is, and like you're just constantly branding naturally because you want to create things that like you see someone do it, like, oh, they have a podcast, it's called this show, here's what mine's gonna be. So you kind of like look at it as an example and then you make it, and that's the funnest part of having Indepreneur for me. Is like getting to make Full Stack Creative, getting to make Creative Juice, getting to build the Indepreneur brand. And I think if you can cultivate that, you're in good territory. But like that can also go wrong, right? Like you can do that a little too much, right? You can like have a separate brand for everything, and it doesn't really like mesh well.
Yeah. Especially when people are first being introduced to any one of them, and you have to decipher what's what, and it's like, well, I haven't heard of any of these things, and there's 5 of them. I think artists do that a lot. Like I'll get emails from people who are like, I've actually been billed. I actually am perfect for this because I have recorded 12 albums. Each of them is a separate piece of a larger narrative story. That artist, I also wrote a book, and they can use the book to navigate the albums. And it's like, this is a robust world, but in the wrong kind of way. You know what I mean? Like you want a rich, textured world people can go into, but it can't be like getting into Game of Thrones now. Yeah.
Right. It can't be like 9 seasons I have to watch.
Sure. Well, the more like kind of fluffy side of all this is and these things are called different things depending on like which article you read, but any brand has or should have like a vision statement.
Yeah, mission statement. Yep.
Yeah, you'll hear vision, mission, positioning,
purpose.
Right. So basically, whatever you want to call either of them, for the sake of this conversation, let's call the big one the vision, and the more secondary one is positioning. And so the vision is kind of like the North Star. It's what's guiding all of your decisions as a individual or a company or whatever. And then positioning is kind of like what you're doing like this year. Like how are you positioned to get where you're looking?
Yeah.
So with big brands like Tesla, for example, they're kind of always looking in the direction of just like sustainable fuel for right now. It's automotive.
Yeah. Their vision is like, we don't use gas anymore.
Right. Well, not even though, because that's too specific, right? Like gas is only for like automotive and other like combustion engines. Like they're powering houses now with the freaking
batteries.
Right.
Yeah.
So even that is more like a positioning thing.
Completely alternative energy. Everything.
Yeah.
All day.
Yeah. Uber is another good example.
That's the actual vision statement. Everything all day alternative.
Elon Musk. Direct quote.
Yeah. And then the positioning is like,
that might have something more to do with like when the first Roadster came out. they were just penetrating that first market, right?
And they were like, we're making luxury cars that are completely sustainable and are like badass, and you'd want it, like if you are into Ferraris and shit.
Yep.
Yeah. That was like kind of where they started.
Yep. So their positioning statement around that time probably was all specific to that like first 2-door on the Lotus chassis that they made.
Yeah.
And then came the Model S, right? Which is like, again, a different, now it's a bigger, comfier,
right,
kind of a family car, right? Like you pick the kids up in it. And so their positioning statement that year was probably changed a little bit too. But the whole time, the vision statement is probably unchanged.
Yeah. So that kind of makes me think about like going back to that scenario of like, you don't want to build 12 individual worlds before anyone knows who the fuck you are.
Yeah.
You want to start off where you're at and have that be the vision, right? Like the vision is to create this rich world that people like know all about, and it's a saga.
Yeah.
But you need to pick up momentum along that journey. And so you start out with like, well, where we're at is we're creating like the very first concept album that has like an accompanying visual world that you can explore. You know, like that's kind of like a good first step.
Yeah.
To, we actually like have a whole catalog of epic sagas about that is expressed musically. You know, like if you're doing something that kind of like audacious and ambitious, you got to start from like kind of square one.
Sure.
And that's true, definitely true for brands like Tesla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, like for a company that size, that vision statement could change, but it's only these like unicorns that typically are changing the vision statement. Like
now, how does the actual visual branding elements, do they interact with that vision and positioning?
not in a very tangible way.
So you wouldn't like design a logo in a way that like in the future it's going to be like a little bit beefed up or have these kind of characteristics because we'll be closer to that vision.
That's a great question because I think it kind of brings us back to more like tangible advice to give your indies. And I'm a huge fan of just simplicity. Like, and so I have to acknowledge some bias there. Like I like that aesthetic. Like the Volkswagen logo is one of my all-time favorite logos, right? It's just
because it largely hasn't changed much.
And well, no, not necessarily, because what I like about it is the simplicity. So like the fact that it's unchanged is like cool, because it means that you don't need to change it.
That's kind of indicative of its sturdiness. Yeah.
Here's the thing: when you have a simple mark like that,
let me explain something to you.
When you have a simple mark like that, the application of it.
So wide.
Yeah, and you can, if we took that Volkswagen logo and we burnt it into this wood, it's going to feel completely different than it does in black and white on a screen.
Right. Versus when they do it with the blue rim.
Sure.
Over metallic striker.
Well, the metallic is a good, right? Like if that thing is big on a wall and it's chrome and it's backlit, that feels completely fucking different than when it's burnt into the wood. You know what I mean? So you can always, as your brand evolves, you can always make decisions like that to tweak like how it's applied. Or even in that example, like Volkswagen could change how their brand is perceived and how it feels just by updating their showrooms, right? Like they could do some dramatic shit to their showrooms. Like the logo's not changing at all, but all of a sudden they've elevated the perception of their brand because their showrooms look different.
I think that's like I don't want musicians to be, I think like musicians might be able to be intimidated by the fact that like logo sounds like something that like you got to have like all these like foreknowledge, and like you can make something very, very simple that just works for a long time to come. Dolce and Gabbana, DC shoes, Gucci.
Well, yeah.
I just described 3 logos that look almost virtually identical to each other in a lot of ways, like interlocking, you know. Yeah. And they work, but they're just simple font, you know, just like expressed in a certain way. Like it's just type.
Yep.
And it's like, you know, like maybe they were made by very, very professional designers. But
I think they all were. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like you didn't need like the sickest illustrator skills in the world to make it, you know? You need a good taste.
Yeah, it's more theory stuff that's at play there.
Yeah.
Like using grids and math to like, you know, like
golden ratio.
The DC logo, for example, I'm sure the gap on the C is derivative of some other geometry in the mark. Like it's probably an eighth the height of the whole mark or something like that.
Right, something like that.
So things like that, you know, designers will know, but that's what you hire them for.
Right.
But the one thing I want to say that I think is really important for your listeners to take to heart is that like one of the biggest things I have to do is like rein clients in because people, for whatever reason, people think that like their whole business needs to be represented by the logo. So it'll be like, well, you know, I'm a yacht broker in South Florida, so it needs to like I want like this yacht on like coming over the
and then,
water.
Like, someone's handing me like a bag of money, and I'm like, "Here's the keys
and ropes and then the Fort Lauderdale water tower in the back." And it's like, dude, you don't need all that. Like,
I just drew you a wave that I think works really well. Here you go.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we're going to convey everything that you're talking about with other pieces of the visual
where
identity.
we put the wave, how the wave interacts with everything else.
What the photos are on the website, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, the hero image on your website's gonna be Fort Lauderdale
They
Beach.
act like, so what you're saying is like, don't worry that your logo is the only thing that they're going to see. Your logo will be couched in a larger context.
The logo is almost never going to be the only thing that they see.
Never.
It's always,
it will always have contextual cues around it.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I love what you said. I didn't mean to hijack that point because I got lost talking about DC and stuff. But like what I mean by their thing is that like where they put it is what matters.
Yep.
Way more than like what it is. Because when you look at it just plain, it's like boring as fuck. The Gucci logo, who gives a shit, you know?
You're talking about the monogram, like the G's?
Yeah, with the interlinked letters. Mm-hmm. It's like that kind of looks a little ugly. But because it's in these contexts, it's associated with luxury.
Yeah.
You know, like I can't read it. It doesn't make good grammatic sense. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's always put in these luxury contexts. It becomes the bulky round glasses. You know what I mean? It just expresses the context it's in pretty well.
Yep.
And I think that's like an important thing to take home is like, just like you said, you can burn it into wood and it changes everything about what you feel from that logo.
Yeah.
And I think like it's a lot easier to get less intimidated by the like building your brand and like figuring out what your logo is if you know that that you're gonna couch it in something.
Yeah, I think people should find comfort in that. Like there's room to, I mean, design systems change and grow, and that's like par for the course.
Yeah.
But the mark and the logo type are good ones to keep like pretty consistent across the board.
What if I'm a new artist, right? And no one gives a shit about what my logo is, but I need to make merch like that people care about, and I need to like build a community and a brand that people care about. Like, where do I go from there? Because obviously it's not just like I make a logo, you know?
I'll get asked pretty often. People will be like, yeah, so here's the company and we want you to make the logo, and like, but we also like, we just want the logo to look so cool that like people are just going to wear it. And I'm like, that's not going to happen.
I don't think anyone's ever going to, like, the only reason someone would want to wear the Indepreneur mark is if they really love Indepreneur.
Exactly. So I guess to answer your question, like, focus on the music, man. That's the product. Like, make a good product.
Yeah.
And then people are gonna want to buy the merch.
Well, what I mean is like putting on your merch design hat for a little bit, because you've done a fair amount of that as well. Like, I think that's also a place where the context you're putting the mark in is what matters. It doesn't matter if the mark's even on the shirt.
Right.
Like, it's a lot more influenced by the rest of the deck. It's a lot more influenced by like the touchy-feely kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I did want to like put a little bit of that in here to kind of like give people a good starting off point of like, okay, like what are the things to consider? Like based on your music, do you look at what maybe your target audience is going to be, and then think about like what their worldview is and try to reinforce that worldview for them, or like, you know?
Yeah, you could. Yeah. I think you just have to know. I mean, in that example, the audience is the target demographic, right? Like your fans are who you're trying to appeal to. So, as far as aesthetically, I think you could the kind of big fork in the road with any collateral is like, okay, do we want to do what everyone else is doing? Like, do we want to be in the same vein? Do I want my metal band's shirt to clearly be a metal band shirt?
Right.
Or do we want to go, maybe you thumb your nose to that and you go the opposite and you're like,
but it is a consideration. Like, do we fit in to the expectation, or do we break it?
Yeah.
And it's not always, I mean, it's very rarely that we break it, right? You have to consider the context of what's been done before and what people expect out of a metal band's branding.
Yeah, for sure. And some people you might want to do that, you know? I mean, that's kind of,
Are you usually looking to break that context a little bit, or are you usually looking to fit in?
it really depends on what it is. You know, if I'm branding a law firm or a financial institution, I'm gonna stay in line with right. Like, we want to convey trustworthiness and all these. You know,
let's not use the Babe head for your law firm.
Right. Yeah.
Although I feel like I'd hire that law firm way quicker. Okay, so we've talked a lot about
boys.
We've talked a lot about, you know, you need your logo type, your colors, your fonts. We've talked a lot about the more ethereal branding aspects. What are you trying to say to the world? You know, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Now, what's something someone can go do right after they're done listening to this, and it will help them in their effort to communicate?
If you're using multiple logos in different places, right? Like, say it's that example we talked about earlier where you're using whatever a friend made for you, and like quarterly your thing is changing.
Stop
that. Unify it, right? Like, go to all your social things, make sure those all are using the same one.
Yeah.
And then it sounds self-serving to say, like, hire a designer, right? Because I am like, I'm not trying to shamelessly plug myself here, but I mean, hire some, even if it's you know. Yesterday we talked about Fiverr a little bit, or maybe do a DIY solution like the Squarespace logo maker or something like that. But lock it in early, because if you do have to change it down the road across all the, you know, if you have the shirts made and you've got, again, these days, I mean, most artists probably have a handful of social media accounts, and anytime a company rebrands, they need, like, the new logo needs to go on all the stuff, and you forget about all the stuff that it's on. So do it right the first time.
Also, like, every minute that you don't have the thing that's going to represent your brand, you're like, accumulation of brand equity is slipping through your fingers, right? Because it's like, I mean, if you're using all these different logos, like, that experience is not attributed back to that Pepsi Circle logo, you know?
Yeah. It's not a total loss.
Right, because they still know, like, oh, I listened to your song.
Right, and I went to that show, and I see your posts, and now there's this icon that represents all that stuff.
But so like, the icon comes in as, like, a new character on your favorite television show. It's like, like, you weren't there for the stuff that we shared, but like, it's cool.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
And on the more ethereal side, what are some, like, thought exercises people can go through that might help them define, like, what their brand is?
Yeah, again, so that North Star thing, right? Like whether you call it a mission statement or a vision statement or whatever, like, kind of try to identify that. And then also the positioning. And I think what's cool about applying that framework that's more typically used for, like, corporate identities and stuff to musicians is that in the same way that separation allows Uber to pivot from, well, not pivot, but also start to pursue delivery services for food and things like that.
Yeah.
You could experiment with new genres. Take it, or just maybe it's just the.
Or you can spin out a label and have, quote unquote, like a collective and have other people underneath your branding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like Prince.
Yeah.
Prince just went off and made a bunch of baby bands underneath the kind of Prince umbrella,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
R.I.P. Prince.
The GOAT, man.
The GOAT. Dukes actually told me a story while he was here that him and our buddy Ollie ran sound at one of Prince's parties.
Whoa.
And it was everything you'd expect out of like the preamble to that story.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's great.
Is that on his episode?
It's not. No, I forgot to ask him again about it, but it's a great story. And basically, our buddy Ollie Dodge didn't recognize that it was Prince. He's like a Prince fan. And he saw Prince and he asked him like if he knew where the bathroom was or something like that. Prince was like, But yeah, you that's the main thing is like preparing yourself for an extension like that ties back to the home base. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, every extension is like floating out there in space, kind of.
Yeah.
In order to arrive at your vision statement, what's a question you might ask that, like, when answered, might be a good framework?
I mean, it's so like nebulous, but just why?
Yeah,
that's the root of the whole thing. Like
why?
Yeah.
Can that be as simple as like, I am a lonely person and I want to connect with people?
100%.
It can be that simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like just honestly answer why you're doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so tight. Well, yeah, I think any indie can take a lot of these lessons and like go and start a solid base for what their brand's going to be, And I think thank you so much for providing all this insight, dude.
Yeah, no sweat, man. I hope it was helpful. It's really easy to kind of get lost in the fluffy stuff when you're talking about this. So I'm trying to kind of balance touching on that, but also some more practical things that people can apply. Yeah. So I hope I hope I kind of arrived somewhere in that ballpark through all this.
Where can we find your work?
You can hit me up on Instagram. My name is Casey Schumacher, CaseySchumacher. My Instagram handle, I realized yesterday when we were vlogging, is particularly hard to plug on things.
Why don't you change that shit up?
It's CT Schumacher with periods in between. So C.T. Schumacher.
Schumacher is very easy to spell, luckily. So.
Yeah, it's great, especially over the phone with customer service representatives. Hit me up on Instagram, shoot me a DM. I know we had talked about maybe like a Q&A thing, so I'd love to hear.
We'll be doing more content.
Some questions from indies directly and try to help how I can.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us here, Casey Schumacher.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Is actually his name. And we'll see the rest of you indies next week on Creative Juice. Yeah. That's branding.
That's branding, baby.
That's branding.